Shows like Rick and Morty aren't what I'd usually cover on this channel. The focus here is generally to cover the creation of Japanese anime, but Rick and Morty is hard to ignore, especially since it spawned several anime shorts of its own. The show is the #1 comedy in the United States among millennials, Adult Swim's biggest hit, apparently enough of a Warner Bros. Icon to find itself in the Space Jam 2 film, and now a character in Fortnite. But we often aren't aware of who's making the show. Sure, we all know the names of Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon by now, and they've capitalized on that fame through wasteful NFTs, but there are hundreds of people involved in creating Rick and Morty. Backgrounds, storyboards, compositing, character designs, rigging, 3D assets. Animation isn't just what we see, it's a process, and for Rick and Morty, a particularly ambitious one. Rick and Morty is a 2D vector show largely built with puppet animation in Toon Boom Harmony. To break that sentence down, it's animated in 2D digitally, but unlike something like anime, each frame isn't drawn individually. I found that it's easier to compare to the 3D process. A character designer draws out a character that gets rigged, basically the process of creating all these invisible bones that can be moved, and then an animator is able to manipulate those and alternate between different expressions and poses to create a convincing animation. Back in high school, my teachers were talking up the abilities of Adobe Flash, and this is where this kind of animation was popularized. It was a huge moment and helped with the rise of web animation. Not only could the whole process be done on a computer, but you didn't have to draw every frame. In-betweens could be automated as long as the movement was simple enough. Today, Toon Boom Harmony is industry standard, bringing the whole process under one software license. It's used in Japan as well, but largely for its capabilities within traditional hand-drawn animation instead. But in the West, digital puppet animation has become quite popular, and it's evolved over time, becoming more convincing with the experience of the animators who work with it. Rick and Morty takes advantage of this process, while also making it way more difficult than it was perhaps intended to be. The advantage is actually one that US animation has struggled with for a while. How do you keep the characters on model? If an episode is being animated by 20 people, how can you ensure that each and every one of them is drawing the character in exactly the same way? This problem is exacerbated when you realize that most US studios don't create the animation in-house, and instead outsource to countries where the process is cheaper. In the case of Rick and Morty, this is Bardell Entertainment in Canada. So puppet animation was an executive and showrunner's dream. It cuts down on retakes, which cost extra time and money. An animator can't draw a character off model if nobody's asking them to draw at all. And so, Rick and Morty could have been a fairly easy show to make, skipping a load of the processes involved in hand-drawn animation. But instead, the show is absurdly dense. Puppet animation works best when you have two characters standing and talking to each other, but Rick and Morty is anything but conventional. Rick and Morty is based on the idea of an animated sitcom, one of the most popular formats on US TV, but it's constantly breaking every convention that you might expect. It's not just that it's science fiction, but that by design it's inconsistent. As Rick himself states, no return trips. This means that the amount of backgrounds and other assets can be massive, and most of it can't be reused. Take episode 6 of season 4, where Rick and Morty get stuck on a narrative device train. Most of these character designs will never appear again. A snow wolf appears for 4 seconds. A rig of Rick with 5 arms only ends up getting used for 3 seconds. And that's not even going into the detailed backgrounds, of which most will appear for mere seconds and never get used again. Since each new alien world means more designs, it also means new rigs, which means new forms of animation. A human character is simple enough, but to sell itself as a sci-fi, the show is constantly bringing in new rigging challenges. The YouTuber Onionskin details in a video the challenge of rigging just one Cronenberg character from season 1, and that's far from the only unconventional character introduced in the last 5 seasons. Honestly speaking, it does feel at this point that the show might as well be created with hand-drawn animation. It already uses hand-drawn effects, and even uses it for the characters during some of its more ambitious scenes. Most notably was the show's Akira moment in the debut of Season 4, created by an uncredited team of animators at Studio Yotta. The year prior, Studio Yotta had already proved themselves with the Rick and Morty Run the Jewels Oh Mama music video, which I believe is the best these characters have ever looked. There's no dialogue, no witty banter, it's entirely relying on the direction and animation work. And because they're not relying on predetermined rigs, we see these characters from new angles with new expressions and lighting. And most importantly, each animator is able to add their own flair. Maybe it's not following a strict style guide, but what's important is that the result is mind-blowing. For this video, I spoke with Jake Gans, animation director on the music video and CEO of Studio Yotta itself, and he talks about the creative freedom his team were offered. Unlike their work on the show, which had to be a bit more conventional to fit with the puppet animation, director Juan Mazaleon and creator Justin Roiland were open to hearing their expertise. Gans says that in many ways, Oh Mama is arguably one of his favourite projects at Yotta so far. They were able to put a lot into it and influence the creative direction along with the director. All of that unique colour work he credits to Joel Cheatham, art director at Yotta. It was a career-defining opportunity from a team that today is often mistaken for a Japanese studio, something that Gans regards as a tremendous honour due to anime being a big inspiration for many of their artists.
I don't want to see any more anime stuff happening to my son, Buster.
Many of the comments on that video ask one question: when can we get that sort of animation on the main series? It's not a difficult style to replicate in hand-drawn animation after all. Imagine the possibilities. I feel that the secret to Yotta's success isn't just that they're a hand-drawn studio. Great things can still be achieved with digital puppetry. More importantly, Yotta is led by animators and artists living and breathing creativity. Animation is at its best when it's surprising, and you can only get that by listening to animators, like we saw in this music video. But that level of creative freedom can be hard to come by in US network television. Studio Yotta has actually pulled back from this industry, citing a toxic culture and both Hollywood executives and the network TV format itself being detrimental to creativity. Instead, the studio will now be focusing on games development and animated trailers. We talk about issues in the Japanese anime industry on this channel a lot, and so I do get a sense of deja vu hearing that one of the most exciting animation studios in the US wants to get out of TV animation because of a toxic industry. In an interview with Rick and Morty director Erica Hayes, she says that animators don't have much creative control. They can include a few small details, but basically their job is to follow the storyboards exactly. For those familiar with anime production, that sounds a bit strange, because some anime storyboards can look like this. How are you meant to follow that exactly? Clearly, there's some room for interpretation, and that's the point in anime. From there, it's up to the animation staff to elaborate on this through layouts. But US animated shows over time have piled more and more work onto the storyboard artists and revisionists. Where an anime episode will usually only need one storyboard artist, the latest episode of Rick and Morty at time of writing features 10. This is because of the absurd level of detail involved. It's insane. Not only are they having to work out the framing, pace and composition of each shot, but they're also including each of the specific motions. The creator of Star vs. the Forces of Evil even referred to storyboard artists as modern day animators, based on how much work they have to do. Take a look at this storyboard for episode 1 of season 5. Not only is everything already on model, but there's a ton of detail. A monster crushing crystals between its jaws, animated flames as the car crashes towards Earth. You could basically watch the whole episode like this and have a good time with it. But the reality is, none of these illustrations are actually going to be used in the show. This is just the scaffold that will tell the animators what to do. And as you can see, those instructions end up being very specific.
We followed your instructions. We have so much to learn from you.
I know, right?
It's like everything ends up being drawn out twice, even while they're both on a strict schedule. I've previously been under the impression that the American studios just outsource all the hard work to overseas companies, but the reality is that both sides are doing overtime to achieve the final product. But does that really have to be the case? Do Canadians not have the required very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty? Copypasta aside, the team at Bardell have been working on the show for years, and so it does seem strange that they're still receiving these extremely detailed storyboards when they clearly already know how these characters act. Like with puppet animation, overly detailed storyboards ensure that the studios in the US are able to receive back an exact image of what they were hoping for when they send them off to overseas teams. Even if there's a language barrier involved, a storyboard like this makes it pretty obvious what your American clients are looking for. Likewise, it's easier for executives to check because it's much more indicative of the final product. But it still feels like overkill. Avatar: The Last Airbender wanted to change the system, putting more creative control in the hands of the animation staff, and the result was generation defining. And while that's just one example and one set of circumstances, it feels like inviting animators into the creative process is always going to be a good thing. But to the higher ups, the executives who just want a show made quick and cheap, creative partnerships like Avatar are rarely going to be a priority. The team in the United States unionized in 2014, earning an increased wage with health and pension benefits. However, the animators in Canada notably aren't. In fact, it was a big deal when Titmouse's Vancouver office unionized, and hopefully it prompts change for more of the industry. A lot of US animation is made in Canada thanks to the tax incentives, but the distance has often resulted in a lot of overtime work, sometimes unpaid, and lower wages compared to their colleagues across the border. And the networks and corporations can often make it easy to forget about the people animating the show. They're rarely given any creative control and are frequently poorly credited.
It just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Ooh la la, someone's gonna get laid in college.
If we want Rick and Morty to get more visually exciting, then it has to start with improving the schedule and paying the artists better. I still like Rick and Morty a lot. The backgrounds are stunning, and the amount of alien designs we see on screen manage to consistently sell this idea of an eclectic sci-fi world. But most of the times that I'm really visually impressed ends up being on the recent side stuff, where these teams have the opportunity to take things a bit further. Like the anime shorts, written, directed and key animated by Takashi Sano. It's a different vision, but I believe that the premise of Rick and Morty is open enough that it can accommodate more of these and try out different production workflows, even if that's within the main show. Thanks for watching The Caneper Effect. I'd like to thank Lawbit and Jake Gans for helping to explain some of the different parts of the unfamiliar world of American animation. But before I go, I'd like to thank these incredible people for supporting the channel. In particular, I'd like to thank Austin Hardwick, Dedameat, Eddie Lehecka, Edwin Shale, Faux Wizard, Frizzy Canadian, Frogkun, Fujay, Jacob Bosley, JR Pictures, My Own Mother, Naylor Drink, Nolan Soga, Quentin Elkin Smith, Robert Miller, Ryan Taylor, and Tom Roman. If you'd like to see more videos like this, but maybe a bit more about anime, please consider visiting patreon.com/thecanepereffect.